Hey y'all, so we're going to work on our two canvas painting today. This is a really cool project because if you really just want to do two separate paintings, you're absolutely welcome to do something different on each. But you can also work in a really cool way of putting them right next to each other and doing one image on both together. So this is a really cool way to play with, just doing something simple but having it be on two, or getting to play with that contrast. So you could do an image completely in more on like the black side, more on like the white side. Do something that's like green and red, contrasting colors like that. Play with concepts of like good and evil, or winter, summer. So we're gonna play with that a little bit more here. I have a tree here in the center that's kind of split between them. And I'm gonna do maybe a winter and like a spring on this side. Have something with like some florals blooming, some bright greens. This is gonna be the same thing, but it being taken over a little bit more by snow and those cooler colors. So I've already sketched out my ideas a little bit. The pencil's a good way to get started because obviously you can paint right over that and then hop right in with your colors. So I'm starting out really simple. I would love working on just some scrap paper underneath because that way I can make my brush strokes as loose as I want without having to worry about dirtying up what's underneath. Maybe we have some roots branching out down here. Your brush strokes are also something you should absolutely think about and use to your advantage. A lot of times when we're painting, you want to really smooth those out, but in this case, it works really well to help replicate some of that bark texture. So I'm just going to keep kind of tapping it through to create that, even maybe mixing a little black into my brown to create some like darker areas. And the nice thing is, if something doesn't look quite right or you want to add something on top later, these layer and cover each other up really, really well. So even like if I want to add flowers over here, I don't need to really stress yet about if I have the space for them. I can just tap them right over this color later. If something's looking a little sparse, I can go back in, add some more branches. There's always room for more in this space here. Yeah. So add one more little guy going up that ways. And that feels pretty good. I think I might add a few more little roots coming out backwards. Can even mix in a little bit of green. Tap on some like moss, particularly on my brighter side. Maybe there's some nice little moss growing on there, even in the winter. Get a little bit of that, so just to brighten things up. And then we can start thinking about our backgrounds. Right now we're really just working on our large areas, not getting too bogged down by the details. For my winter sky, I'm going to go a little bit cooler. I'm adding a touch of purple into that blue and white. Get kind of a gray sky in the winter. I want to create something similar to that. Remember, we can go back in and crisp up all of these lines later, so we don't have to worry about that little bit of that smudge in between, because I plan on adding some snow piled up on some of these branches. So that's going to help blend and incorporate all that work later. For my summery side, let's add a lot more blue, get that really vibrant sky that we're starting to see now. And if you want, you can leave space for clouds now, or just tap those in later, just like we're going to do with the snow. And if I feel like I overdid myself a little bit on the tree here, I can overpaint that with my sky and clean up any of those lines. All right. got some like rolling hills here in the back. I'm going to start with some green. And again, using those directional lines and my brush strokes to my advantage. I've got the hills kind of coming down and out, so I'm going to use my brush strokes to highlight that so I'm not losing my direction in here. And then I can also use some upward motions to help create more of that grass texture. Some little blades happening. And in your pack, you're going to have some of those really cool Arteza fine line pens. And those are going to be a really cool extra step in this if you want. So after you finish painting all of this, if you're like, my grass is cool, but it's not quite what I want, feel free to go in with some of your green pens to add some tiny little blades of grass hiding in there. And that's going to give it a whole new dimension. So my whole hill here in the back, I might even darken up a little bit. Even during the summer, you've got some little patches that might not be doing as well. They might be getting a little dried out, so we can tap in a little brown there. And here in my foreground, I've got this kind of little river coming through the whole thing. Is where it's starting to meet my grass here, or my tree here, rather, in the foreground. So that's my foreground, the closest things to me, my background, farther away. So here in my foreground, things are going to be a little more detailed because they're in our frame of view. When you have things in the background, you get foreshortening, which simply means they look shorter. They're smaller. Things that are far away in our vision get tinier. So it's the reason why if someone's far away, you can squish their head with your finger. But if they were close, they're obviously much, much bigger than your hand. So we'll let that dry a little bit. We can add a little more extra detail after it's started to dry up. For my winter, let's get a little bit of like a cool green brown color happening. Some of that grass might not be doing so well, but it's still underneath all of this. It's not going to all be covered in snow necessarily. There might be some little things peeking out above there. Same thing over here. I can start to add some more of those little vertical lines for the grass as well. Kind of peeking out and over. Our water, this is kind of fun. So you can mix a little blue and white together, and instead of mixing them really thoroughly, you can create kind of a marbled effect because water kind of bubbles and moves a lot. So there's a lot of energy to water, and that way you don't have to worry about completely replicating that. Instead, let the paint work for you. Kind of just blobbing it on in there. So when water bubbles and froths, you get those little kind of fluffy, whiter areas. So I'm going to have it get a little bit bigger here, my river, as we get towards the front, because it's visually becoming a bit bigger. Whereas over here, where it's disappearing into the horizon, it's a lot smaller. I'm going to have it be a little bit whiter, a little bit colder, a little more still here on my winter side. Water's a little more frozen. It's not flowing quite as freely as it might during the summer when all that ice is melted and the rivers are much higher. There's still a little bit of movement though. It's still water. But again, keeping with those directional lines, my water won't make much sense if it's going vertical like that. And for my snow, obviously snow is white, but a little bit of touch of blue in there helps make it look a little more alive. A little more like energy going on in there, so that snow can start to kind of pile. Tap some onto our tree now. It's got weight to it. So it's going to kind of sit on the top there where it falls, be a little heavy on those branches. It might catch in some of those little nooks and crannies. And this is just a really good, like if your brush is a little bit dry, you can get some really, really beautiful texture. Pile a little bit down here on the trunk. Might even be some little icy patches in our water here. Think about what, bushes and things might still be doing okay during the winter. You can tap some of those in here. Maybe some little guys hiding in the back. Little stones by our river. Let all of that dry for a little bit while I work on my flowers. So again, this is where your pens could kind of come in handy later if you want to get some really detailed, like, centers to the flowers or detailed petals. I'm going to get a lot looser with it. I'm going to let this be a little more of an abstract landscape. I'm not going to get super bogged down in the details. I'm just going to tap on those flowers the same way I did with my snow. But the flower is going to create a lot more bulk. They're going to grow off in little branches and create a lot more heft to the tree than the snow did. The snow's weighing it down, the flowers are expanding and allowing that tree to become a lot bigger. So I'm tapping in just some pure red as well to help add a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of texture and contrast going in there, just like I added a little blue into my snow to give it a little bit more of a shadow. Maybe even a little white to do the same thing, a little bit of a highlight in some of there. Little goes a long way. You don't have to worry about it too much, just kind of let it flow around. Now that's had a little bit of time to sit. You should have two brushes, a bigger one and one that's a bit smaller. So your smaller one is really good for going back in, adding a little bit of extra detail. I can go back in and redefine my hills. I want them to be some little stones here. Nature doesn't really have, black outlines the way that cartoons and a lot of, art does. But you can use a little bit of black to help give you a little bit more contrast in some of these areas that you feel like you're getting a little muddled. So a touch of black into my green to help outline my hills is totally fine. Same thing with my tree here. I might give it a little more definition with the bark there. From here, you could keep adding more and more detail, get really into it, or you can kind of enjoy the looser look. That's totally up to you. This part is super easy to make your own. You can do a landscape outside your house, something you can see, or create something completely new. That is totally up to you and whatever makes you happiest and what you'd like to see hanging on your wall. So whenever you feel good about it, go ahead and let it dry and then hang them up together. You can give them a little bit of space between them, or you can put them right up against each other. Let's go ahead and peel these up where they're still wet, just so you can see that contrast a lot better. So now that they have a little bit of space, you get a lot more of that intense contrast between the two. All right, we're excited to see what you create with yours.